It's such an important thing to attend to. Someone else says, save some money, do what my dad does. He's got a note taped on a cup in the kitchen. It says, don't embalm me, just have me cremated and buried with mum. I guess that'll have legal standing. Probably doesn't cover every eventuality, but I like his style. Richard's a fan of George Michael. He says, just remember, George was incredible, Jesse. Not only did he compose and perform these great songs, he also produced and engineered the recordings as well, similar to Prince in a way. Amazing artist. Thanks, Richard. And I noted that album Faith, I think, was the first album by a white artist to go to number one on what were then called the Billboard Top Black Album charts, for what it's worth. We're going to talk TV in a moment. We've got another information centre cold call. And then our expert today, we're talking about writing scripts for TV and the movies. Right now, let's talk TV, because Brooks Alexander is on the line. Hi, Brooks.
Hi, Jesse. Thanks for having me.
Good. Yeah, you're welcome. Great to have you on. And actually, interestingly, you're mentioning a couple of shows that are on in our house at the moment as well. Can I just be frank with you, Brooks?
Mm-hmm.
We tried to watch episode 1 of the latest series of Silo on Saturday night, and I found it so slow I had to abort. And we really enjoyed the first season, but man, oh man, I could not get into that one. So instead we went and watched Shrinking. We watched the first episode of that and quite enjoyed it. So I know you're covering both of them. Tell me your impressions, and you can start wherever you like.
I think I agree. I think my job title here is television reviewer, not television recommender. So I'm also not sure that I can recommend season 2 of Silo either. I found season 1 a little bit turgidly paced as well.
Yeah.
I think it's based upon a really well-reviewed book series called Wool. And I think the first season reviewed the first 30 chapters or so of a 80-chapter book. And I think the adaptation choices that they're making are a bit questionable. Season 1 ended with this big reveal, which I won't reveal for people who haven't seen it. And then season 2 so far seems to be struggling with where to take it. And I've seen so many science fiction shows at this point. I'm also struggling with maybe a lack of originality, I guess. It's another sort of dystopian series where all the men and women live in this giant underground silo where they're told the outside world is toxic and dangerous and they don't know what's going on. But with every answer, I've sort of become less interested, as many good mystery shows are. The mystery is more interesting than the answers. So far, it's only been 3 episodes so far, and it's streaming on Apple Plus. And I will finish it. I think the acting is great. I think Rebecca Ferguson is great, and Tim Robbins. It's always good to see him acting. But I agree. So far, season 2 has been a little bit of a disappointment so far. But it's maybe people feel differently. I have a friend who's really enjoying it, so I will stick with it. I think I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah. Once I've turned off a TV show, it's very rare I'll come back to it, but we might give it a go.
I agree.
Feel free to text us on 2101 if you think it's worth persevering with. I haven't come across Arcane.
Arcane, yes. So it's actually the -- show on Netflix at the moment. It always makes a big splash when it comes out. And it's a TV show based upon the game League of Legends, which initially turned me off, but kind of in a similar way to the Lego movie. And how everybody was like, how the heck are they going to make a movie based on Legos? It's a similar thing where how the heck are they going to make a compelling TV show based on this video game? And they've knocked it out of the park. So far, they've just finished season 2, and it's told us a complete story. They'd always envisioned it as 2 seasons, and it's completely animated. It's a fantasy animated show, and the budget of the 2 seasons together is $250 million, which is, I believe, higher than the budget of both of those animated Spider-Verse movies that came out recently. So it's arguably the most impressive Western animation I've ever seen.
How do you spend that much money on an animation?
I know, and a Netflix show as well. But honestly, you can see it on the screen. Like every episode has such detail and care, and they'll often swap art styles for key moments. You know, when someone dies, they do the entire funeral in this beautiful, like, pastel black and white style. And it's just gorgeous. Unfortunately, I will say, I think their decision to only make it 2 seasons hampered them. I think it's a similar situation to Game of Thrones season 8, where they could have gotten 3 seasons out of that material, but I think they're so keen to make other shows based on this League of Legends universe, which has so many interesting characters to follow, that they sort of rushed through it, and they could have gotten multiple seasons out of it. So the best show of all time is there. And
Thank you, everyone, for coming along. As you will have seen from the press release, we have our first recorded case of HPAI in poultry in New Zealand. Now, that's not to say we obviously have low pathogen avian influenza that's been in wildlife in New Zealand for a while. It was detected or reported to MPI last Friday afternoon. I received notification 5 p.m. on Friday, and over the weekend on Saturday, samples were taken, flown up, tested. Saturday night came back that it was the H7N1 strain, but wasn't sure whether it's high path or low path at that point. Sunday night at about 8 o'clock, we had confirmation, well, I got confirmation that it was the high path strain. We'd put a restricted place notice on the farm during that day and had investigators heading down, already on farm, looking into doing more tracing and testing. Today, more people are down there involved in testing and tracing. We've traced to other properties of interest, which we'll be investigating, and there will be depopulation will begin on Tuesday. Just want to emphasise, firstly, well done to the MPI team for doing all of that amount of work over a weekend. It's certainly shown that our systems are good and robust in terms of being prepared for this. I think we've got some stragglers. Yeah. Okay. Do you want me to start again? Okay, no worries. What's it? Oh, yeah. Yeah.
How many numbers is it going through?
Yeah. That's all right. We got everyone now? No, too bad if they're not. So, once again, thank you all for coming. As you'll have seen from our press release, we announced that we have our first recorded case of high pathogen avian influenza that's been found in a poultry farm in New Zealand. We do have low pathogen avian influenza circulating around New Zealand wildlife. So this is different to the strain that's happening globally that we've been concerned about and been talking about, which is high pathogen H5N1. What we have here in New Zealand is high pathogen H7N6, so a different strain. The timeline of events was the farm in question. They were noticing issues last week. They reported to MPI on Friday afternoon some concerns. We had a person down, I was informed 5 p.m. Friday evening. We had a person down there on Saturday. Tests were taken. Those tests came back Saturday night saying that this was the H7N6 strain, but we didn't know at that stage whether it was high pathogen or low pathogen. On Sunday, we again had more people head down. We put a restricted place notice on that farm to effectively lock it down. We started tracing of movements in and out of that farm, and we also got the test results back at around 8 o'clock saying that it was in fact high pathogen avian influenza. Today, more people have headed down to do further testing and contact tracing, and tomorrow depopulation of that farm will commence. Firstly, I'd just like to say really well done to the MPI staff involved for really getting onto this so quickly, particularly over a weekend, and coming back so fast with the information and putting measures in place so that we can contain this. Rapid response is what is needed in these situations to prevent spread, and so we've done a good job here. Just also, I really feel for the farmer involved. Being a farmer myself, it's a huge stress whenever you've got any sort of animal health issue on farm, and I guess the whole industry should be grateful for this farmer for reporting and enabling us to get on top of this early. Finally, I'd just like to add that, for the public, I know we've been talking a lot about H5N1 and the threats that it poses. This is a different strain. There are a couple of key things here. I would emphasise that there is no food safety risk as long as you cook the poultry and eggs properly as recommended, which you need to do for a whole range of other factors anyway. And there is, no evidence overseas. There have been many outbreaks of H7 high pathogen avian influenza overseas, and hasn't been a reported case of human contact of that. So the human health element or human safety, we're fairly confident that there are very minimal risks here. Same with, as we've been talking about with the H5N1 strain, a lot of concern around what that might mean for our wildlife. In this strain here, there's been, again, overseas, no evidence of it moving back from poultry into wildlife. So we do not have to worry about a spread back to wildlife and across the country. Our concern around spread will be people and gear moving from the affected property to other properties, which we're busy tracing at the moment. And finally, we've got this locked down at this stage in one shed on that farm, and we're going to, really test and make sure that it hasn't spread anywhere else, and we've got measures in place to be trying to get on top of that spread if it was to spread to other sheds and prevent it from moving to other farms. So I've got a whole range of experts here from health, Doc, biosecurity, food safety, and Ray. So happy to take any questions. You're an expert in lots of stuff, Ray.
What are the risks here? If this spreads, what are the main principles of concern?
So the main concern, if it was to spread, would be to our poultry industry. So that's the main area of concern. I don't know, Ray, if you wanted to add any more on that.
No, thanks, Minister. I think that's the main risk here is a poultry industry risk because of the type of virus that we've got. So this particular virus is prevalent in poultry farms around the world because it's a mutation of a locally adapted virus. So it's not something that's been introduced into New Zealand. It's something that's adapted or mutated from a low pathogenic virus in New Zealand. So the critical thing is we get in quickly and eradicate it from the particular site. So as the Minister said, we'll depopulate the poultry there in the sheds that are affected and try to make sure that we trace any movements over the last couple of weeks that have gone from that farm to make sure we don't have spread further out.
How many other farms could be at risk? Is there a particular number that you've identified that are close by or have been in contact with this one?
So at the moment there's been 2 other sheds or farms that are viewed as potential risks, and another, probably 4 others, wasn't it, Stu? Low level, medium. So, measures are in place and testing is happening around those other farms. Stu, did you want to add more?
Yeah, no, that's right. We've identified 6 that have connections to that property. What we're doing at the moment is now working through the exact nature of those connections, what's moved backwards or forwards, what risk that could present, and then off the back of that, any further action that needs to be taken. So it's a work in progress at the moment to understand that network of movements.
How confident are you that it hasn't spread to those farms?
So at the moment, there are no signs in any other poultry farms or operations of sickness or reduced production, which you'd expect to see with this strain. So we're not seeing or having any reports of that from any other properties at the moment.
And we're also not seeing any signs in the other sheds on that property at this stage.
How many chickens are affected on that initial farm?
40,000 are in that shed. Yeah.
Quite a significant number.
It's about 20% of the poultry farm.
That farm, yeah.
And they will be destroyed?
Yes.
The farm reported this to NPI on Friday, but how long did they have concerns for before they made the report?
So they'd initially started noticing issues back on Monday, and they'd had their vet in who was doing further testing because diseases happen on farms on a regular basis, and the first point of call is always your local vet to try and diagnose the problem and work through what the issues may be. And certainly, the symptoms were not that of high pathogen avian influenza to start with, but then they contacted Mary on Friday, wasn't it?
Is that a regular amount of time to have lapsed between informing NPI?
Mary, or?
Look, they did the right thing. They didn't have influenza symptoms, which you might have expected, and they actually were applying antibiotics and trying that. And then as the days went on and they saw mortality increasing, that's when they notified. So no, we think they handled it exactly right.
There's talk of the mutation of this into a high pathogen. Did that occur outside of the farm, or was that occurring once this had been picked up in contact with the seafowl? Am I correct?
Waterfowl.
Yeah, I think Mary's probably best to answer this, but my understanding is that in all likelihood you had other birds that had the low pathogen strain were in contact with birds in the shed, and then the mutation happened within the shed. But Mary's the much better expert on this than I am, so.
Minister, I think that was a good answer. The traditional way that highly pathogenic avian influenza emerges in commercial poultry is that there's a spillover event from a low path strain of the disease in wildlife, like ducks or waterfowl, that spills over in a contact between wildlife and poultry. And then that disease, or that virus, as it gets passed between chickens in that poultry house, mutates. And that can then change into a highly pathogenic strain.
So
and
it's the conditions of the farming that are likely to have contributed to this mutation?
yes, and also because of the way avian influenza viruses are, right? They get passed really easily between chickens, and they also are really labile, so they change bits out all the time. So as we know with influenza viruses, every year human influenza viruses change, right? And it's exactly the same with avian influenza viruses, highly labile.
How confident are you that we can eradicate it?
Very confident. You saw in Australia they had H7 cases there, and they have removed it from those locations. So we're probably in a better space with the fact that this farm is actually way more isolated from neighbouring farms as opposed to the farms of where it happened in Australia. So we're in a much better place than Australia was in terms of stopping it and eradicating it. This, as Mary and Ray had mentioned, this happens a lot overseas, and basically they depopulate where it happens, and that takes care of it. So really reasonably confident that we can get on top of it.
Even if we eradicate it this time of year, do you expect we'll have repeated incursions because it's such an international problem?
I don't
Could be.
know if it. I mean, Mary again would be the expert, but you know, it's always been you roll the dice enough, you come up with certain numbers. So this could happen again, but again, it would be the same thing of it's better for us to stamp it out in those locations and prevent spread elsewhere. So it could happen again. I don't know the risk factors. Mary, do you any idea?
Difficult to know.
Yeah.
If this containment or eradication doesn't prove to be successful, what are your concerns for the industry and for the country?
Look, obviously there would be concerns in the industry. However, I do think I'm pretty confident that we will be on top of this. So, it's overseas experience has shown the processes to be able to stamp this out and eradicate it. We only a few months ago had a group from MPI and the poultry industry go over to Australia and visit the farms where they'd had the outbreak there and learn from what they did. So, the team's been given a lot of prep in recent months to make sure we're learning from overseas experiences, and we're able to, I guess, start from a better place than what a number of these countries did in their efforts, because we've kind of learnt from what they've done.
The other thing that's probably useful context on that is within the last 4 years we've had 2 other poultry related diseases that we've managed to remove from the system. One was IBDV, which is a bursal disease, which was introduced into New Zealand. It got into a few farms, and we managed to eradicate that and take that out of the network. And the second one, you might recall, was when we had Salmonella enteritis, and we were worried about that, and it was particularly in the eggs. And so, again, we managed to eradicate that. So we're going through a similar process. Yeah. We'll trace out, find the farms where it might be, or they might get reported through symptoms, take quick action to circle around those and put zones around those, and then slowly you delimit the number of farms that are affected until you can be confident that you removed it from the system. So that normal biosecurity process that we always take when a disease arrives is exactly what we're going to do here. And, we might find another farm or two. That's often the case. They pop up because there's an incubation period between when these symptoms become noticeable. Hopefully, it's just this one farm, and we can stop it there. Yeah.
Is this infection likely to impact the wider supply chain at all?
Not at this stage, because, as I said, it's only one shed on one farm. So, if we're able to keep on top of it, no, it won't have any impact.
Will there be any food recalls or anything like that?
No, as I said at the start, poultry, eggs are safe. The avian influenza is very susceptible to heat. So, you just need to cook it in the normal, proper manner. We're constantly telling people don't eat raw chicken, and this reinforces that message for another reason why not to eat raw chicken. Yeah.
That 80% of the poultry that you said wasn't affected. How can we be sure that's not at risk?
Well, it's potentially at risk. That's why there is a restricted place notice on that farm. That's why we've already done yesterday. There were the two most at-risk sheds that were closest to it, had testing done. More testing has been done today. We'll be getting results back from that testing yesterday later tonight, and obviously tomorrow getting results back from those other sheds. And so we'll keep on testing, and just that restricted place notice will stay in place until we're certain that we have eradicated it from that premise.
So just to clarify, how many chickens are going to be killed? Is it all of that 40,000?
40,000 in that shed.
And they'll all be depopulated?
Yes.
What are the costs for the business?
So when we put a restricted place notice on, that means we're effectively using powers under the Biosecurity Act, in which case they are compensatable. So for any cost that the business has suffered as a result of us applying the Biosecurity Act, they will be compensated for.
Has this farm been Herbert?
Moiraki.
Pass.
Moiraki.
So,
No.
is this a useful sort of dry run, just in case H5N1 does end up here?
Very useful. Unplanned, unwanted, but very useful, and I think we'll make the most very good use of this experience to really sharpen our systems and make sure, I commend the team so far for the actions that have been undertaken. But obviously there'll be some things we can learn from it, and that'll help us, if we ever do have H5N1 arrive, or if this was to be repeated again with an H7 variant.
The fact that it's a free-range farm, is that working in your favour?
It probably actually increases the risk because free range are more open to wildlife coming and visiting them. So I was at a free range farm 2 weeks ago. We're announcing the preparedness campaign for H5N1, and one of the actions that free range farms will need to take, and that farmer was showing me his systems, that when, if H5N1 were to come, they will need to basically secure their chickens inside the buildings to stop any sort of outside wildlife birds getting in. If you're a fan of Clarkson's Farm, or if you haven't watched Clarkson's Farm, recommend season 1. Jeremy goes through what he had to do to protect his birds over in the UK.
And when you talked about the impact for the supply chain, I imagine there'll be some anxiety about an egg shortage, considering the response to last time.
Yeah.
Would that be a fair response, that there could be egg shortages again?
Look, at this stage you would say no, there won't be egg shortages because, as I mentioned, it's limited to one shed on one farm. Now, if that were to change, maybe, but I'll just stress to people, don't need to go out and stockpile eggs, and for the love of God, don't go and stockpile toilet paper. We don't need that again.
How's the farmer feeling?
Obviously, I haven't I'm going down to meet him tomorrow, but, obviously, beaten up, as you would. No one wants to have this happen on their property. I think Stu or Mary, you may have talked to him and be able to...
Yes, John Mackay is the chief executive of Mainland, and fortunately he travelled with our staff to the UK only a couple of months ago when we were looking at how they handle bird flu outbreaks. So he's well versed. We've been working together as a team with the industry actually for several months now. So that's been a positive in a sense that we've been getting ourselves well prepared for the big one if it arrived. So now that we've got this strain here, we're dealing with someone that's seen on the ground how others have responded. So look, but it'll be challenging for him with all of his staff today as they prepare. And there's a big exercise in depopulating and then cleaning those sheds, and then of course repopulating again once they're clear.
Do you know how long it might take?
2 or 3 days.
2 or 3 days to depopulate,
yeah.
And then there'll be a cleaning period. So that'll probably, you're probably looking at a sort of 4 to 6 week period between depopulating, cleaning, testing as best you can in the environment that the virus is not present, and then repopulating again.
I know this is a bit grim, but how do you kill that many chickens?
Because you'll be aware, or you may not be aware, but poultry farms are always having to depopulate and repopulate, and so they have large containers, and they go into the containers, and it's effectively a carbon dioxide process.
Can you, sorry, you probably said this, but what is the next phase of sort of testing the other farms, and what's the timeline for determining that there's no other?
Well, as we mentioned earlier, the incubation period can be between 14 and 21 days. So, we are going to be testing for that period of time, and that's, if we go out 21 days from now and there's been no other positive tests, I think we can feel fairly reassured that we've gotten on top of this.
And across the other farms, do you have the total figure of possible poultry numbers that could be at risk?
Top of my head, I don't have the. I think the main, but just to give you a bit of context, I mean, Mainland Farms, it's sizable, but it's not. I don't think it's the biggest operation by any stretch. So that's got about 200,000 birds, I think. But there are bigger ones as well, and there's a lot spread throughout New Zealand, and including in the North Island. So there'd be a long way to go before we became concerned about supply issues or repopulation issues. Yeah.
What lessons have you learned from the bovis response that applied here?
I think the biggest lesson from bovis was we had something that was circulating from So I wasn't at MPI, obviously I was just a farmer back then, but I would say the biggest problem was there, something was circulating for nearly probably 2 years before we identified it. Here, we're on top of this pretty early. And so, that was the biggest challenge with Bovis, was all that tracing, trying to work out where all these animals have gone. That's what's taken so long. Very different position here. I wouldn't liken this to Bovis at all. I think it's very, very different.
One bonus question then. You know how there was concern from DOC about the implications of a virus like this for native birds? Have you had much of a discussion with them about this?
They're right here. Look, obviously we've been working with health and DOC in terms of if H5N1 was to arrive. DOC have been doing work around managing or how can they protect wildlife with the vaccination program. But I will.
Yeah, are we able to hear about the current risk, like what you assess that is?
Yeah, so to repeat what the Minister said before, we think in this situation it's a really low risk because there isn't evidence that this is likely to get back into the wild. So we're continuing to work with MPI on preparing for H5N1, and we've been doing some vaccination trials, but they're quite limited in their use because you have to have known birds that you can recapture multiple times to give them different doses, and that's been more a trial to understand whether our native birds develop antibodies. We've got plans of all the locations we need to look at and how we would look after different species, but it is a challenge because there's not actually a lot that you can do.
Thank you. Nothing else? Thank you.
Sorry, I've got a bit like standing over. Do you want to do a quick debrief?